it's temporary.
Oh,
It's
it
fake.
is?
It's fake news.
Oh.
I don't know what the problem is. I don't know. I mean, I just know it's not clear what group code is. Might be.
So much better.
Might be.
So much
It
better.
just needs to be
That's what I'm
fixed.
saying, yeah. I agree
It's
with
poor
that. That's what we're
quality.
saying, yeah.
It's not right.
They're gonna fix it. That's what he said.
I know, it's just not right. Just making sure. If we're gonna run a business, we need to run it right.
Human in here.
Yeah, I said, I couldn't believe how bad it still is out there.
I know. What's that?
Thank you, thank
Like turn it so it's cooler,
We need it, yeah.
so like it'll be cooler in here.
Look,
That's what you mean by turn it down. Now I turn it down to make it warmer.
I'm keeping my mouth shut now. I've Shuffled
Thank
enough
you, Mr.
feathers.
James.
Just go power.
See, you understand.
Good.
The big budget
Wondering when this is
preparation
coming.
document. Oh, boy.
This is my favorite.
This is a, hey,
How are you, sir?
fan
I
myself.
like
with
that your
this thing,
shirt
it's so
matches
thick.
the cover of your
This
handout.
thing is huge.
It's very
You
awesome.
want blue?
especially-
All right.
Does he?
Yeah, go through a lot of toner using that blue there, Rob.
He's the only one who gets used color printing. We're all fans, we have to be like,
One day a year.
Oh, yeah. I've heard schools that. Yeah. Yes, it is, yes, it is. So you had a power outage today, so did I, yeah. How long were you out?
You have mine.
Today or no?
I could probably skip it, I don't think, because I don't have any meetings. Mine don't come up till next week anyhow.
Oh.
You want a table? Yeah, you want-
What'd you
Cindy,
say?
Table lays on the next meeting.
Say again?
We can table lays on the
Got me
next
all
meeting. You want to do that?
Stressed. I do. Just a quick one.
Yeah, well, I'll say it at the end. I'll say it at the end.
You gonna say it at the end, maybe?
No, we have a meeting on Thursday, but that's all right.
Janice might have some.
Do you have anything for the laser?
You know what? No, don't worry about it.
Because we were thinking of the budget presentation.
Yeah, let's do that. Good idea. Yeah,
We'll table it next time.
yeah.
We'll table lays on the next meeting.
Where's Mr. James?
Table lays on the next meeting. Us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a sign-up sheet in the back of the room if you would like to make a comment regarding our action items or a general comment at the end of our meeting. Moving on to our agenda, approvals, deletions, and additions. Dr. Bracco.
Thank you, Mr. Bax. So you do have a revised agenda at your workstation this evening. Those revisions are Roman numeral 7, A5, that's under my section, 7B, 1 and 3, 7C, 1, 7D, 2 and 3, and 7E, 1 and 2. And those items are at your station if they are new items.
So moved.
We have a motion from Dr. Malko.
Second?
Second from Ms. Lessentine. Any comments or questions regarding the approvals, deletions, and additions? All right, I didn't hear any, so let's take a vote on it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to our correspondence, Ms. Suze.
There is none this evening.
All right, thank you. We are going to table our liaison committee updates until our next meeting due to our budget meeting this evening and presentation. We're looking forward to that, by the way. So we'll move on to our official school board business topics, our consent agenda. Dr. Bracco.
Thank you again, Mr. Bax. So seek board approval of the minutes from our work session and our last meeting, August 19th, our regular board meeting from August 19th, and approval of the claims, payroll, and extracurricular expenditures you received last week in your packets.
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Suze, a second from Mr. Marshall. Any comments regarding our consent agenda? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Now, are there any public comments regarding action items? Nope. So we'll move on to our official school board business topics for this evening, our regular agenda. Once again, Dr. Bracco.
Okay, our first item is to recognize an outstanding high school student, and I'd like to invite Mr. Freeman forward to help us with this presentation. If the board can reconfigure in front of tables.
The Harvard Book Award, or Harvard Prize Book, is an award given out to alumni, or by the alumni of Harvard University to a top-performing student in 11th or 12th grade in nearly 2,000 selected high schools from around the world. This award has been presented to students since 1910. At Lake Central, the award is sponsored by Glenn Hockman Stewart. Glenn is a 2002 graduate of Lake Central High School and a 2006 graduate of Harvard University. Along with this award, Gwen and her husband Michael have been tremendous supporters of Lake Central High School students and have wanted to pursue their post-secondary education at Harvard University. Lake Central High School teacher Kendall Smith, along with the Lake Central administration, award this prize to a top junior at the completion of his or her 11th grade year. This year's winner is an outstanding student, a 4.545 out of 4.0 GPA, scoring a 33 on her ACT, 1430 on her SAT. She also represented Lake Central High School at the Washington University chemistry competition. This year's Harvard Book Award winner for Lake Central High School is Martha Davis. Martha is the daughter of Jim and Maggie Davis of Dyer. Daughter of James, who is a sophomore at LC. Martha is awarded the Harvard Book Award for exceptional academic performance at Lake Central High School. Her hard work, dedication, and determination reflect greatly upon herself, her family, and Lake Central High School. Congratulations, young lady. There's this. Congratulations.
Martha, outstanding. Thank you, Davis family, for coming out. If you need to get home to other things, you're free to go. Or you can stay and listen to our budget. Unfortunately, we have none. Thanks for coming. My second item this evening is to seek board approval for the St. John School Resource Officer Agreement. It was signed last month by St. John Town Council, checked one final time by our school attorney, and brought to you for your approval. It is the same language that you saw in the draft version.
So moved.
We have a motion from Dr. Malkow, and I will second that motion. Any comments or questions regarding our St. John SRO agreement?
So
All
it
right.
had everything clarified that you needed to have clarified?
Yeah, we clarified that back in July. It just took a little longer to get everything through the process.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
And the St. John officer's been with us
Right.
since
Yeah.
That's good.
early August.
All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. My next item is to seek board approval for 3A through F. These are the board policies that are being updated per our discussion at the August 19th work session. And I asked the board to approve them in totality.
Move to approve.
A motion from Ms. Suze.
Second?
We have a second from Mr. Marshall. Any comments or questions regarding those board policy updates? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you again. My fourth item is to open a discussion regarding Lake Central High School student use of lockers, potential back parent transparency, and bus stop issues. And I've opened it up for Howard to initiate his concerns that were brought to him by some community members.
Thank you, Dr. Marco. Basically, I brought the issue up at our last board meeting on the basis of a number of patrons who have approached me with the following scenarios. They're claiming, and maybe Marty can chip in with this, that a number of students throughout the year, into the cold months even, will leave their coats out in the cars, other places to avoid having to go to their locker all the time. They're claiming that there's insufficient time to move around the different areas for different classes. Also, in terms of the backpacks, a couple of comments were made to me. The excessive weights of carrying all the books that many students will do as opposed to going back and forth between lockers. I have no students in the high school anymore. We raised 3 girls that graduated, the last one a number of years ago. So I feel free to any fellow board members to chime in or add additional comments. I'm basically bringing this forward for general discussion.
I would start with the coat issue. If you ride the bus, you're exiting your bus at 5 till 7. It gives you ample time to go to your locker at least once to place your coat in your locker. And then at the end of the day, there's ample time after the dismissal bell before the buses would pull out. Students who drive themselves, if they get here at the last second, I can see that being a problem, but that can be remedied by adjusting one's departure time from home. The coat thing, I think, is a family issue that I don't know how the school can really force a student to wear a sweatshirt or a coat from their car or from the bus. But I don't think there's a ton of legitimacy to that. In terms of passing in between classes, I also think by and large, most students prefer to socialize in between class periods than go back to their locker. And I've talked to some students who have told me that. In the past, 6 minutes was enough even with the narrow, crowded hallways. And you know, we've made major improvements on that. I would think that if there is an extenuating circumstance. I don't know what remote area of the building that would be at this point, because most of our upperclassmen stay on one of the 3 floors, or they go to the music wing. And they could have to come down here on occasion, but not all that frequently. Maybe Mr. Freeman could say what they would do if there would be a student who, going back to their locker, would cause them a problem. But my point is, it definitely wouldn't happen between every period. So there should be a way to go back to your locker at least some during the day. There may be once where it creates a time crunch with a 6-minute passing period. And I had bus stops on here, and maybe this is just something I wanted to talk about, so I will. I've had some parents question, how it seemed like we used to pick up more kids right at their door, and that is probably true. If you look back to when our transportation department was not running on a balanced budget, we had a lot of buses that were, I'll just call it lightly ridden. You would see the bus with less than a quarter full. And so when we hired Christian Flores, we said, we need you to reduce the number of routes. Thank goodness with the bus driver shortage, right? But we need those buses to be more towards capacity, even if it makes the route go from 25 minutes to 40 minutes. We need to pick up more kids with each bus. And so, as I explained to parents, that we will move a route for a kindergartner, so the first grader or second grader may have to walk 2 doors down to accommodate that kindergartner. And the high school kids, they may have to walk 3 or 4 doors as well, because there may even be fewer routes on account of the ridership. So I think that bus stop must have just been in my head, because I've taken some calls over the years on it, and people are concerned about it. But we do try to reduce the stops so the routes don't get too long. And for older kids, it does mean walking 3, 4 doors down, so that the routes can try to be around 45 minutes. So I would ask Marty to see if he wants to say anything, because he deals with it daily in terms of the locker topic.
I didn't see the email. You want me to present from here or up there?
Yeah, why don't you come up if you have something prepared?
While he's coming up, with the buses, Dr. Bracco, if there are not sidewalks, though, that go all the way from the house to the bus stop, does that prevent a bus stop, or does that move a bus stop if there are no sidewalks?
The student should get picked up at their driveway if there's no sidewalk, if it's a new neighborhood you're talking about.
Okay, it's not a new neighborhood, but I'll talk to you about it, because we have a new neighbor on her street, and they don't know that, and I don't think they will call, but I just want to ask, only because that came up, otherwise I wouldn't have. But I stopped the little girl at the bus stop who is now walking a quarter mile without a sidewalk and can't be seen from her house. And that
We
frightens
should be
me.
able to accommodate that.
Right, yeah, we always have in the past. Like I said, it was just, I think it's because it's a new family, that's all. We've always been really good about that.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to ask them. Thank you.
Lake Central High School is an 8,800 square foot facility. It's not uncommon to have this discussion again every school year. Freshmen trying to learn the nooks and crannies, trying to find the shortcuts, trying to find their ways. Thank you to the board, thank you to the community for giving us this brand new, beautiful building. In the past, I think it was worse with the crowded hallways. Back then we could give an extended minute from, if they were going from the freshman center top floor to, we had specific rooms that if kids were going to, we would allow time. Students have 6 minutes for a passing period. Back in the day, we played music for the first 5. Now we've instituted the minute bell, which is a warning bell. If you walk through our halls at any time in a passing period, you will find all kinds of kids just hanging out until that minute bell goes off, and then they all scatter. Room locations, we've done a good job of, for the most part, most of the freshman classes are in E Hall. Sophomores are lower C Hall. Juniors are second floor C, and seniors are the third floor on C. The lockers for each of those students are also assigned to those floors. So your freshmen are all in E Hall, your sophomores are in lower C. So their lockers are in the same vicinity of their classrooms. Students not using the backpacks of personal choice. Again, I agree with Dr. Rocco. I think a lot of times they want to socialize and not do it. Kids, even my own children, have 2 book bags. They have one for Blue Day, one for White Day.
But you're good.
So-
I've seen you.
Thank you. So, I think a lot of the part is with the garments out in the car is so they can get out. Once the buses start moving at 2:15, we shut down all traffic. The only thing that's moving is the green light coming out and getting the buses out. So, if you go out any day at 2:09 when that bell rings, there are kids sprinting through the parking lot to get to their cars. As far as the transparent book bags or the mesh book bags, there are some schools that have tried that. Those book bags break down, usually within a week, they're destroyed. But those, you also have the issue with females and feminine products. And, if you go to a school safety meeting, you can't stop crazy. If somebody wants to bring something in, they can bring it in on their person. Even with the vapes and the dab pens, there was one student that I was searching last year. I knew he had it on him. I couldn't find it. Told him I was going to metal detector him, and he had a pair of sweatpants on. And those dab pens fit in perfect in the string hole
Wow.
in the sweats.
Wow.
So, book bag, no book bag. If he wanted to bring that in, he was going to bring it in. He brought it in on his person. He didn't need a book bag. So, Mr. Begley did take a tour today, started at the guidance office, went up to Upper E, and then walked back and went up to third floor C Hall, and then back to the guidance, and it was 7 minutes, 45 seconds, the entire round trip. Didn't have anything on the bus stops because that wasn't on the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
I appreciate the comments both from Marty and Dr. Veraco. I'll carry them back. I don't know if there's any additional comments from fellow board members. Sandy?
I will agree that my kids also carried 2 backpacks. The 2 backpacks, I don't think it's the block days that are the issues. I think it's the traditional days that are the issues because their backpacks were over 60 pounds on those traditional days. I do think we need to look into consideration. I too do not like the clear or the mesh. I think they break down too easy. We spend probably $200 per kid per year on backpacks here because they need 2 to 3 a year here. They do. That's what we're going through, and we need to realize that. I think there are some things we can do. Can we look into, we have a lot of brand new textbooks that all have online supports. Why aren't we using a classroom set in the class and letting them use the online book at home if that's what they want? Or they get to order an online textbook and bring it home so that they, I know that we can't have 2 sets everywhere, but I do think there might be some situations that we could possibly look into. Because like I said, it's not the block days, it's those traditional days where they're carrying all these books and they can't get them into 2. As for the clear and mesh again, companies have been making clothes with secret compartments to hide stuff. I know that parents want to think they feel safer if it's clear or mesh, but you can put a weapon inside of a book inside of a clear book bag. There's compartments with clothes, things like that. They've been making them for years. So I would like to see, while I'm okay with them carrying backpacks and things like that, I would like to see what can we check into with all these new materials that we're buying. Some of these books are this thick. What can we do for our kids? Again, I'm not saying that not carrying a backpack is the answer, but are there online text codes that they can use at home rather than and have a classroom set? I think that there might be some other outside the box ideas we could think of.
That classroom set was a topic that was discussed tonight at the department head meetings after school.
Good.
Because we were talking about English and your world languages you're adopting this year. And part of that discussion was, could we do a class set and then do the online book? So that is something that we are looking at.
Yeah. And it's not the community needs to understand, it doesn't make it any cheaper because the online books are no cheaper than the physical books when we look at that. And we do need to realize that our costs may initially go up slightly because we're buying that extra set of, let's say, 120 books because there's 4 teachers teaching that prep. But is it worth those 120 books to save the backs and the knees and everything else, shoulders?
So there's an extra, I thought online textbook access codes were free when you bought the textbooks. They're not anymore?
No.
Back in the day they were.
Not anymore.
They were new back then,
Not
so,
anymore.
okay.
Any other comments?
All right.
My kids, I did poll them, and they said they use that time to socialize. They have plenty of time to get to a locker if need be, but they choose to socialize. And they've not worn winter coats since 6th grade. So
Yeah,
Yeah, mine don't.
or
either.
fourth grade.
they wear heavy hoodies.
Right. If you say, Mom, we're only going from the inside to the car.
To bus, to the school.
That's it. Why do we need
Right.
jackets? Yeah.
So,
All right, thank you. Thank you, Howard. Thank you for that discussion.
Okay, my final item, I just wanted to update the board. We did have a power outage today at Protsman Elementary School. There was some kind of mini cloudburst or windburst that blew, knocked a couple limbs onto some lines, and I think maybe one transformer. I think they were down about 90 minutes. The reason I put it on here mainly is because the generator did work, and in case anyone would hear from any community member who's worried about perishable food, the generator keeps our cooling units working. So they did prepare cold sandwiches today at Protsman for student lunch because they couldn't keep stuff warm even if they could bring it from another school. So the lunch today was a cold lunch. But I just wanted the board to know, and the community, that the milk doesn't spoil because it stays in a cooler that runs off the generator.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rockwell. All right, moving on to our Director of Human Resources, Terry Mucha.
Thank you very much. We're asking that the following appointments and for classified certified be approved as presented.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Mr. Marshall.
second.
We have a second from Ms. Lessentine. Okay, any comments or questions regarding those personnel recommendations? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to kind of give you the good and bad news on the substitute teacher summary. The good news is that out of our substitutes from the 18-19 school year, we hired 13 as paraprofessionals and 8 were hired as teachers, which is kind of cool. You know, they're seeing how they work in the schools and then hiring them for permanent positions, so that we're very happy with. For the school year we're in now, we've added 5 new paraprofessional substitutes and 9 new substitute teachers, with 6 new substitute teachers that just have a little bit more to add on to. Unfortunately, that kind of just evens out and doesn't make our substitute list that much more. But the good news is that we have a chance to get to know these people and to hire them as good employees here at Lake Central.
Nice.
So I just thought I'd update you on where we were with substitutes.
All right, thank you.
Our second one is to ask for some consideration for a raise for our nurse substitutes. Gave you just a separate page on this. We currently just have 13 substitutes for nurses. And although that sounds like a lot, many of them have other jobs and they have second jobs or family responsibilities, so they can't always come and be a substitute. Last year, we used nurse substitutes 174 times.
Oh.
Now, that's diabetics going on field trips, that's hearing screenings and different kinds of screenings where we need our nurses and have to have a substitute in the building. But we pride ourselves on having a nurse in every building every day. There's just too many medical things that go on. And we are having a hard time getting nurse substitutes because they say things like, we're going to a neighboring school system that pays more instead of coming to Lake Central.
Yeah.
So I am asking the board to approve a raise for our substitute nurses to $21 an hour so we can be competitive. And also, you know, they're doing the same job as the nurses that are already in that building.
Where are we at now? With,
We are at
$15.50.
15, yeah, we're at 15.
15.50? Wow.
And so they
Wow.
can go and earn $5 more
Yeah.
an hour in other school districts. And for instance, one school district that I just talked to said they pay their substitute nurses the same exact salary as they do their nurses.
Okay.
So
All right.
moved.
All right, there's a motion from Dr. Malkow,
Second?
a second from Ms. Sues. Any comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to our Director of Primary Education, Teresa Schoen.
Thank you. My first item is to seek your approval of the professional
We have a motion from Ms. Lessonty. A second from Mr. Marshall. Any comments, questions regarding the professional leave request? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
And my second item, as you know, I've shared information on the Uni Pop-Up Library Project.
Yeah.
That has been the brainchild or passion of Mrs. Ahrens, and I did ask her to come back tonight to share the highlights of a fabulous Uni summer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Mrs. Schoen, and thank you to the school board and the administration for having me here today to give my uni update. My subtitle for this presentation is How I Spent My Summer Vacation. So basically the summer of the uni started at the end of last school year when we had, do I need this for the video? Okay, we were able to take the uni on a tour of the elementary schools with the help of Mr. Ledgerd and his staff. With the help of Mr. Ledgerd and his staff, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Cantu, we were able to take the uni to each of the elementary schools. I got to spend a day at each school, and the students, I got to meet with, if not every single one of them, then the vast majority of the students. I got to show them the uni. They got to look at all of the new books, which was very exciting for them. And I told them how it was going to work, where we would be over the summer. So here, these are just shots of kids at schools enjoying the uni. And then every single student left with one of these. And this was a save the date magnet. And it was designed by Ms. Verputten here at the high school. She did our uni logo, and she also designed this magnet. But this magnet ended up being a really great piece of communication because it was a little more substantial than a piece of paper. So you could take it home and you could put it somewhere where it was out of the way, but it was still visible. And it had all of the information that our families needed for to know where we were in the summer. It listed all of the locations where we were going to be and the dates that we were going to be there. So this was a really nice piece of communication, and like I said, every student got one. So then our very first event, our kickoff event, was a party in the park at Reeder Park in Cherville. That was on May 31st, which was our kiddos' first day of summer vacation. And I don't know if you guys remember, but it ended up being a really nice summer day. It had rained a lot beforehand, but that day the sun came out, the birds were singing, everyone was happy in the park. We had teachers from all over the district who showed up just to say hi and support us. We had administrators. Ms. Schoen came out to see us. You can see Ms. Yelich there in one of the pictures in her big bad wolf costume. So we had a lot of support from a lot of different people. And this was a great event because we ended up checking out a little under 200 books that night, wow, which was very unexpected and very exciting. And I spent the rest of the weekend shopping for books, which Mr. James and his staff can attest to. So once we had our kickoff, we kind of slid into our regular summer routine of Tuesdays and Thursdays. We had a total of 18 events over the summer. We had, like I said, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we were busy the whole summer, right up until the week before school started. Our last event was that Thursday. We had 2 cancellations for weather. One day at the beginning of the summer, it was 52 degrees and raining, and then later on in the summer, we had a day where it was 92 degrees and raining. So we had 2 cancellations, but 18 successful events. This number I'm really proud of. We checked out 1,034 books to students this summer in the community, and that's just amazing to me, especially given the fact that last summer that number would be 0. So we made great strides This was a great opportunity for the kids in our community. And this next number is pretty cool too. We had 411 unique users. So we had a lot of repeat customers, but we had a lot of people whose, parents and families felt like it was worthwhile enough to come out and check us out and then maybe come and see us again. So I was really proud of that number as well. A couple of highlights from the summer. One of those would definitely be the art in the park. And I had mentioned that we were going to try this. So this was June 27th out at Reeder Park. And Miss Miller, she's in this picture over here. She's an art teacher from Bibbage and Watson. She came out, she graciously volunteered her time and led the students in painting canvases that showed an open book. And all the kids got to check out books. And we just got a really nice response here. We got a lot of positive feedback from the community. It was a really great event. Another success story for the summer would be our partnership with Lake County Public Libraries. They very graciously, at the very beginning of this, offered to take our returns. This was a really nice thing for us to be able to tell parents as they're checking out these books, you can return this to the uni, but you can also take it to any branch of the Lake County Public Library. That was a huge service that they did for us. Chris Reddig of the Dyer-Sherville branch, she collected the returns from all over Lake County, from Munster to Maryville. People were returning books and taking advantage of that. And then she would just call me and I would go pick them up. So that was a really nice thing that they did for us. Also, Dyer-Sherville, Chris Reddig again, she sent out some youth services librarians, and she would send them out to volunteer at our events. And so they would be able to mix and mingle with the students. They would be able to talk to them about, getting a library card. They would talk to them about their own summer reading program. So that kind of worked to the benefit of both parties. One more success story would be our volunteers this summer. We had students from middle school, a specific family, Drew and Ben Pershawn from Clark Middle. They came out to every event at Lake Hills and they helped the younger kids pick out books. They were wonderful. They helped us set up and break down. They were awesome. We had teachers and we had principals who came out and volunteered to read. You can see a picture there of Miss Ranich from Coling doing a read aloud also at Lake Hills. And then we also had high school students who came out and volunteered. So in this bottom picture down here, you can see Michaela Spears. She's a senior this year. She came out and did read alouds with the kids as well. So I would say that the volunteer effort here would really be a success story for the summer. And it would be a mistake if I did not mention our amazing staff at the elementary level. We have, and Officer Patrick came out too. He's a good guy. We are blessed to have librarians who work so hard during the school year to build these amazing relationships with kids. And time after time, I would see kids come up and they would make eye contact with their librarian and their faces would glow and they would pump their fists and jump up and down because they were so happy to see these ladies. This program, this uni program, would not exist in this form or fashion without the heart of these women in our elementary libraries because the kids just can't get enough of them. So there's some more of that. Challenges. So one of the challenges I would say is always going to be when you're starting something new and you're talking about a community as large as ours, communication. I need to do a better job next year of taking advantage of the Alert Now message system. I had a lot of principals. Ms. Cruz was always sending out Alert Nows. Everyone was willing to help. It's just going to be a matter of me going to them and reaching out and saying, yes, can you do this tonight for tomorrow? So that communication, we're going to work on that for next year. I would also like to really grow our Twitter and Instagram following. We have, a little under 200 followers, but if you're here and you have your device in front of you and you're not already following us, go ahead and give us a follow because that's a way that I can communicate if we have a cancellation. So communication is something that we will definitely work on for next year. We had 2 events that were not as well attended as we would have hoped. So when we start to look at putting a calendar together for next year, we will definitely be having conversations about, do we need to change locations? Do we need to swap out this place for that place? Is that going to serve our community better? As well as, maybe we need to change times. 9 to noon works really well in some places, but some of our community members might do better with a 4 to 6. So those are discussions that we will have in the future. Plans for next year. My hope is that we are able to purchase an additional cart. I would like to designate that as the middle school cart and really reach out to that audience. I think if we do some really targeted outreach and some special promotions and programming there, we can grow that audience. I know that there are readers there. I know that there are readers who would take advantage of this. So that's one of my hopes for next year. Another one, and this was Dr. Veracco's idea, is to keep one of our libraries in the schools open on Wednesdays during the summer. So that would give our students access to books through us Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday throughout the whole summer, which would just be amazing. And I want to kind of wrap up by saying, I know I've mentioned a lot of names here. That was on purpose. I want to make sure that everyone understands that this was not an army of one. This was a lot of people coming together from all over the district to make this program a success for our students. And so I just want to say thank you. If I didn't mention your name, I remember what you did, and I am very grateful. So with that, anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Anybody?
Yeah.
I do, Mrs. Ahrens. At one point, we had the opportunity in the summer to take accelerated reader exams. The students did. Does that happen through the uni? Can they take accelerated reader? Thank you. AR exams over any of the materials they read?
So that would require a certain setup within Renaissance Place, within the program, where we had summer classes, which we don't currently have that. Because if a student is not enrolled in a class with a teacher in the side of the program, then they can't take quizzes. The other issue would be we would have to be in locations where we had either a hotspot or access to Wi-Fi.
No,
So
and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take it actually in the park, but
Oh.
at one point, the county libraries were set, or at least Sherrville and Dyer and St. John were set up with a computer to do AR tests. So could the students read the books through UNI and then go in and take an AR test?
they, like I said, they would have to be set up in the
So that doesn't work
program.
in the summer.
Yeah,
Okay,
not the way we have things set up currently.
just wondering.
Right. Any other questions?
If I could add something, Elizabeth thanked a lot of people, but honestly, she needs to be recognized because it's her passion that
Oh, yeah,
drove this.
definitely.
I would see her barreling into central office, and I knew there was an idea.
Thank you very much. She
Thank you.
dedicated a lot of hours
Oh,
this
yeah,
summer.
she sure did.
And look forward to the schedule for next year.
I was gonna say, will the dates be the same for next year, or are you doing new dates?
I
Always.
think we'll stick with the Tuesday, Thursday. We kind of took a break over the 4th of July holiday, and I'm going to look at that a little more closely and try to keep more dates in front of that holiday, because afterwards, there was a big drop-off, because people were on vacation.
Yeah,
Sure.
true.
So we have some tweaking to do with the schedule, but it will still be Tuesday, Thursday.
So then a possible hype things up type of deal, if you're gonna do a save the date magnet, maybe you can do a contest for the kids to design whatever the picture is, so that then they will start getting hyped about uni coming out and whoever's picture's out there. That was my only recommendation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For those people that didn't do the math, that's over 58 books a day that went out at each one of those 18
Wow.
events.
amazing.
So
That's amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
All right. That it? I think that's it. Moving on to our Director of Secondary Education, Sarah Castaneda.
Thank you. For my first item, I am seeking your approval for the professional leave request, the revised copy that you received this evening.
So moved.
We We have a motion from Dr. Malkow, and I'll second that motion. Any comments or questions regarding those professional leave requests? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. For my second item, I am seeking your approval for the revised field trip request that you received this evening.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Suze
Second.
and a second from Dr. Malkow. Any comments or questions regarding the field trips? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And for my last item, I just wanted to update you on some information from the Indiana Department of Education. We were very fortunate at our Thursday Ready Northwest Indiana meeting last week that Dr. McCormick, our state superintendent, was able to come and speak to the group of administrators who were present at Hoover High School. We're definitely going to miss Dr. McCormick once that new position's over to an appointed position. She's been absolutely amazing. Some of the things that she reviewed was just sort of the status of the state. One of the more shocking statistics was that they had to issue 3,500 emergency permits this year for teaching positions, which shows that the teacher shortage is alive and well in Indiana. She also pointed the group towards the Governor's Commission on Teacher Pay. There are some meetings that are set up mostly around the Indianapolis area, but one thing we wanted to give attention to is that this commission is actually taking feedback from the field. And so there is a website that we're going to be pushing out to all of our certified staff. And if you as board and community members would like to chime in, there's a link on the document that I gave you where you can give feedback, because Indiana is one of the lowest ranking states for teacher pay. And so the governor has said he's committed to researching the problem and hopefully coming up with a solution to fix it. So if you have any input, I highly recommend filling it out. Another topic that she spoke about is the graduation pathways. If you'll recall, this is the first year that that is the requirement for our current freshman students in order to graduate. Remember that the previous students, so the students who are currently in 10th through 12th grade now, and also last year's seniors, have the option of using graduation pathways and will continue to have that option. And so she gave us some information that last year 16,000 graduates across the state used graduation pathways in order to earn their diploma. Most utilized option for bucket 2, which are the employability skills, was the work-based learning. And then tying along with that, the most utilized option for bucket 3 was the CTE concentrator, or the ASVAB assessment, which they saw a high volume of that test given across the state because it is easier than the ISTEP, ELA, and math that they currently have to take. We think that as the freshman group moves forward, that those most utilized options will change. If you recall, in bucket 2, service-based learning can apply to students who are in clubs, co-curricular activities, and sports. So we think that will get utilized quite a bit. And then bucket 3 probably will be pretty evenly split between the different tests that are available or coursework options. She did advise us to keep an eye on the CTE situation in Indiana. That whole area of education has moved under the domain of the Department of Workforce Development and the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. So right now, a CTE concentrator is 2 higher level courses, but they could make a move to change that, and we'll just have to move with it. She said that the DOE will continue to focus this next year on supporting schools in literacy and STEM, which they've always been very supportive of. However, there is a continued push for social emotional learning in the schools, which we've talked about here at Lake Central before. Indiana ranks 3rd in the nation in suicide attempts among youth. We also have had an increase in our free and reduced student population, as well as our rate of homelessness. Research does show when you incorporate social emotional learning into schools, not only do you see improved academic performance, but you see improved coping skills, improved mental health, and hopefully long-term more stability for them as young adults. The other thing she brought attention to is the fact that Forbes recently listed the skills, the top skills that employers are looking for in recent graduates, and a lot of them can be tied to components of social emotional learning. They want people who have the ability to work in a team, to solve problems, to make decisions, and to communicate with people inside and outside of organizations. And so all of those are soft skills that students develop as we do different activities that tie into social emotional learning in the classroom. The last thing she spoke about was the economic outlook in Indiana, which was probably the weakest part of the presentation. She is working closely with economic professors from Purdue and Ball State, and they've seen an alarming trend in Indiana in the job market, where there's a movement away from jobs that require a higher level of training or education. They said this could have a significant impact on the state. The trend across most of the nation is a greater demand for graduates with either a 2 or 4-year degree or training or certification in a trade or skilled position. However, in Indiana, most of the job growth that they're expecting is going to be in low-paying jobs that require a high school diploma or less. And so she said that that's something that we as educators and that the people within the business community really need to think about if that's the way we want our state to be represented. The last piece that I wanted to add was just on the iLearn situation. I'm sure many of you saw on Wednesday that the governor and Dr. McCormick issued a joint statement. They want the General Assembly to pass legislation that would allow us to hold harmless educators in school districts this year, given the fact that iLearn scores are so low. There is a State Board of Education meeting tomorrow where they will release or unembargo the data for all the schools across the state. And it is down, as I shared with the board privately, and we'll talk more about that in public once the embargo is lifted. So we are hopeful that the General Assembly will heed their advice and give the State Board of Education the authority to not count school letter grades and individual growth measures for teachers in math and language arts towards their teacher evaluations for this year until we figure out what's going on with this next.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I do, but I'm gonna wait until.
Okay, Mr. Marshall?
I just got a general question. If I could back up to the field trips, Sarah.
Sure.
I had a notation down here and forgot to ask. I see between the two different field trips, there's a $17 differential between each field trip. And that could be from the day of the week the tickets are and/or seat location, or number of students attending. I don't know.
I believe it's the time, the day of the week and the time of the year.
Oh.
One group is going closer to the holiday
Time.
season, and so
Okay.
that's why the cost are
That
really
makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Dr. Malco?
I was listening to the radio today and I heard them mention something about Build Indiana. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
You're not, okay. But you are, Howard?
I'm aware of it.
Okay.
No expert,
you-
just aware of it.
Do you know how, does that affect the schools, Larry? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know what it is, okay.
I'll look into it.
Okay, it was
Do you
just,
have a little synopsis of it, or?
well, I think it's more looking at the trades and getting our students ready for the trades. But then I'm thinking, are they connecting with what our economists are saying and what's happening in Indiana that we're at a high school diploma or less? I mean,
I think the businesses that we're drawing in just have more of those lower paying, low demand positions. And that's definitely not what our state's known for. The trades would fall into the higher level of education
Right.
because they have to go through an apprenticeship. They have
Right.
to go through training for that. So in no way was she trying to make a derogatory remark about that, but sort of the lower paying, low demand jobs, those are the ones that we seem to be attracting in this state. And if that's the case, then our students who are going on and obtaining a position within the trades or going on to a 2 or 4-year program are going to find jobs outside of Indiana, which is not what we want. We want
yeah, it just seems like there's a disconnect there. And there's so much growth around the Indianapolis area that I'm so
Yeah.
surprised to hear that.
That's surprising. Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say is that it seems like Dr. McCormick definitely had Governor Holcomb's ear during her tenure, because for him to create a commission to study teacher pay like that, you can tell that she was definitely had an effect.
She's been a force, and she
Yeah.
definitely was a huge loss when she stepped down.
Yeah, she will be.
So,
The
oh,
website
go ahead.
says, just as a side note, the website says that the Build Indiana Commission is primary focused on road and bridge network in Indiana.
Oh, really? Okay.
That there are 500 different companies in Indiana that employ thousands of Hoosiers who build and repair roads and bridges.
Okay. Sandy?
Let's hope they're educated well. Just saying. So I have a couple questions for you. When they're talking about the 16,000 graduates that used the graduation pathways last year, does that mean that 16,000 kids in our state failed the I-STEP math and ELA?
That's what I thought.
My other question, when we go down, when we talk about bucket 2, we'll probably see a trend of service-based learning since students can meet it by participating in a club, co-curricular, or sport. What are they doing that's service-based learning in a club, co-curricular, or sport? I'm just curious that now falls into a graduation requirement.
So for employability skills, the things that they want students to focus on is dependability, time management, cooperation, possible leadership positions. And so what the Department of Education has said is that if you fulfill a season of a club, a sport, or a co-curricular, and at the end of it, you have the sponsor sit down with the students, talk about the employability skills, and then say, what have you learned and how is this meaningful? And you can document that those additional conversations and education about what does employability skills mean, that actually can be then a document that can be used to check off the box too.
And do we have that document for our clubs and our activities yet?
We do.
And all of our sponsors and all of our coaches are doing that?
No, we're starting the training process this year because the freshman is the first group that really can use that with fidelity.
Okay, perfect. We are still doing our social emotional learning, like that is still moving forward, correct?
It is.
Okay, so I guess this question, it might not be something to answer now, but I guess my question would be, because I know we moved our guidance administrator from guidance over to the discipline side, is my understanding, when we moved Melissa Reddick?
She still works with guidance.
Correct, but isn't she also discipline as well now?
She does not do a caseload of discipline.
Okay, just, she's still all guidance?
She's guidance and testing and kids programs and so forth.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure, that we were still doing that. And then for our soft skills on the back page where Forbes shows about those soft skills, where are those in our curriculum? Where can parents find those in our curriculum? Have we plugged those in so we know where those are happening at each subject area? And at which levels?
Problem solving, decision making, I mean, those are part of the process skills in math. Those are definitely components that we integrate into any time they do a collaborative activity within class, but is it exactly spelled out in every subject area's curriculum gaps?
Is that something we're going to work towards then? Because I know that problem solving is obviously in math, but I also know that many students don't use the problem solving that they learn in math in the real world. They use problem solving that maybe to write out a document or to figure out how something works, things like that. So are we implementing those into our curriculum then?
Well, I mean, it would be incorporated within computer science, for example. It would be incorporated into any of the collaborative work that they do on the Google Suite of applications that we have when they're working on Google Docs and different shared projects together. So again, it's not clearly defined in the curriculum, but it's definitely present. But that's something we want to emphasize through the social emotional learning as well.
Well, and that's what I'm saying though, is I don't know if our kids know that they're learning those in those, is what I'm saying. If we don't have them defined within the curriculum, if we can't necessarily pinpoint which ones they are, then I don't know if our students are realizing that they're learning these things. So I'm thinking that there should be objectives and goals and things like that that are going to come along with this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. And then my last question comes with the iLearn. We've been talking about this for years, that tests haven't been real reliable, and I know that I've been asking for local assessments, a pre and a post test at each level. It's easy enough to say, here's your pre-test for 6th grade math and here's your post test, so we have a local assessment. Have we gone anywhere with those? Do we have local assessments that we can check student growth with since this isn't working?
We have ECAs in almost all the subjects for middle and high school. Not a
And-
pre and a post per se, but definitely semester-based assessments. We haven't done the pre and the post test.
So is that something we want to look into then? If we know that the iLearn for years now is not giving us any data on whether or not our students are growing, shouldn't we be looking at some sort of a pre-post test? I know we give semester final exams like at the high school level, but if we're not giving a pre and a post, how do we know if a 3rd grader or a 8th grader or a 12th grader are learning? I guess my thing is, this should be part of what we're doing. If we can't check it from the state, we have to do something to show our kids are learning. So I personally would like to see something done that if we know now for years and years and years that the state has said that this iLearn and these other tests are not worthy, then we need to do something as a district.
Agreed, and I mean, at the elementary level, and I don't want to speak for Teresa, they have the pivot benchmarks that we use. I brought to the board before the iReady data of the benchmark that we use 3 times throughout the course of the year that does show student growth.
Okay.
I think the area where we fall short is trying to bring more attention to that data, because that is much more reliable data that we have faith in than these iReady assessments. And I think Dr. Knopfler brought that up, and needs some more attention to the things we already do locally.
Right.
To take it away.
Right, yeah.
That's my point as well, is that if we have this local data, let's focus on that then. If we know that the state data isn't there, then let's focus on our local. Let's look at those scores that you just talked about. Let's look at our AP. Let's look at our final exams. Let's find out what's going on. So.
And it really is just a matter of us deciding what's important to us as a school community. I mean, we know iLearn is not effective, we know iStep
Right.
was not effective, so what are we gonna use? And we have some great assessments that we are using, so if we could organize that and use that to
Yeah,
benefit ourselves, it would be great.
absolutely. Thank you for checking into all this and getting this all to us.
Thank you. That was a great conversation. Thank you.
Yes.
And discussion. Thank you, Sarah. Moving on to our Director of Student Services, Becky Gramella.
Thank you. I'm going to talk some more assessment. So I have three professional leave requests that were added to your packet. I'm asking for your approval after that travel has occurred, and then my following presentation will be to explain why we had to get that training done. So, so first, I guess I would seek your approval for the professional leave requests in the packet.
We have a motion from Mr. Marshall,
Second.
and a second from Dr. Malco. Okay, any comments or questions? We will hear soon.
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. So we have a brand new assessment for our preschool students, and that is called iSprout. So we previously administered something called the iStar KR, and that's required. We're required to assess our students, our preschool students with disabilities. iStar KR was the assessment that we used before. There were some problems with it. Primarily, is that it was it was aimed at kindergarten readiness. So they were general kindergarten readiness standards that we assessed our students on their progression towards those standards. They were not aligned to the Indiana Early Learning Foundations, which are the standards that the state has put together for early childhood. So our assessment really didn't match what we were supposed to be teaching. And it was also based within the Learning Connection, which is being decommissioned this year. So we're losing the Indiana Learning Connection, and iStar KR was through that. And then also there were a lot of technical support issues with it. We'd lose kids in that program all the time and then have to add them back in. It was not a very user-friendly system. So based on all of those problems, the Department of Ed put out a RFP basically looking for a new provider like they've done with all of our other assessments. And so iSprout is our new assessment. It was developed with the Johns Hopkins School of Education, with input from Indiana early childhood teachers and administrators. So it's a joint effort. So we will now it's based on our Indiana Early Learning Foundation, so we're going to be assessing students on the actual standards in there's sort of three main categories, and that's social emotional, knowledge and skills, and then independence and motor coordination. So those are our three overarching areas, and then beneath that, there's specific skill areas. So this will be administered by the teachers observing the students in the classroom. So we're looking for that performance in a natural setting. So it's not, please don't be afraid that we're gonna have our 3-year-olds sitting down taking a pencil and paper test. It's primarily observation from our staff. The teachers will be able to access this either through a web browser or there is an app that's free for us to download, and our early childhood teachers all do have iPads, so they would be able to administer that right on the iPad. So the hitch with this, and the reason we had to send folks to the training last week, is that we found out about this on August 15th, and all of the assessment for all of our preschool students is supposed to be completed within the first 6 weeks of the school year. We do not have access to the online assessment yet, so we are having to print paper copies that then our staff will have to go back in and enter everything into the online program. So we sent last week Allison Mazurkowitz, who's one of our assistant principals and coordinates our early childhood program. She went to the data administrator training in Indianapolis. Then 2 of our SLPs, our speech language pathologists who do a lot of coordinating with our program, went to the Train the Trainer program. So they created a Train the Trainer training. Those ladies now have to come back and train all of our providers that work with kids, because everybody will be completing different pieces of this assessment. And then our teachers, who will be the end users on the training, have to complete 8 to 10 hours of training through online modules and pass an assessment before they are able.
6 weeks.
Well, yes. So we are bumping up against that timeline. I have told our staff at this point, we just need to do the best we can do. Each teacher has about 15 students they will have to assess that are in our classroom right now. But we have no concept of how long each student is going to take because it is brand new. So we had to move quickly and get the staff trained, so typically I would not let them go on a PD session before it was approved by the board, but we didn't really have a choice. So we'll be moving ahead with this. I am excited in the webinar that I was able to view. I think it's going to give us some really great information about our students. It's certainly going to be more, I think, applicable and show more growth for our kiddos than the previous assessment did. But it is definitely, it's a rush job to get it going, and it is stressful for our early childhood staff right now. So that's my update on iSprout, and as we get more information on that, and certainly as we start seeing what our scores look like. So we have to complete this test when students enter our program. That's why we're doing sort of our initial assessment now, and then we assess them annually on their birthday, and then we assess them when they exit. So that's how we monitor their growth within the program. So, and if you remember last year when I shared our new special education accountability data, our preschool students are included in that. So I don't know what we'll do this year. It's similar to what we're hearing with iLearn, where we have a new assessment, so it'll be interesting to see how they factor that in to our accountability this year. But we're going to give it a shot, and I think it'll be good in the long run. It's just keeping everybody calm through this initial training piece.
Yeah. Any questions?
Any idea why the last minute notification from the state on this?
I think it was like we've seen with other things, just the development of the assessment, and just it wasn't ready. And the frustrating thing that I heard from my fellow special education directors when I met with them, and we did have a rep from the DOE present, is just the double time. You know, we're going to complete all of this on paper, but then it has to be re-entered into the system so we can get that growth measure. So that's, and the timeline is a requirement of the assessment in order for the scores to be valid, that it be done within that first 6 weeks of school. So it's just, I don't know that it's going to be physically possible for us to get that done in 6 weeks, and we're just going to do our best.
But everybody's on the same page
Yes.
within the state. So
Yes,
that is
we're
a good thing.
all in the same boat and trying to get this done.
Now, if I remember correctly, last year you changed the design of the preschool programs, and you went somewhere 3 days, and do you remember the change in the schedule, or was that 2 years ago?
That was 2 years ago,
Uh-huh.
where we changed our program, so our teachers, some of our teachers only teach 4 days a week, and the 5th day, they're holding conferences, they're doing our initial preschool assessments, or participating in our community screenings.
So are we still on that schedule, the 4 days?
We are. We did because our programs were full. We have 2 classes now that are 5 days a week, where those teachers, that just opened up more slots for us to have kids in the classroom, and it helped kind of spread out our numbers. So we have 1 class at Watson where there are students 5 days a week, so that teacher is not involved in any of our community screenings or evaluations. And then we have 1 class at Bibbage that's that way.
We just have the 2 preschools then?
No, we have 6, actually 7. We have 1 specialized program for students with autism, and then we have 6 that are just a mix of students.
With the role
We have
models?
4 at Bibbage and 4 at Watson and 2 at Bibbage.
Wow,
Okay. Mr. Marshall.
Don, would it be appropriate for board member comment about a previous presentation Becky made, or should I wait till board comments?
No, that's fine if you'd like to make that comment now.
If I'm not mistaken, in our last board meeting, you made a presentation on the state requirement for dyslexic screening.
That was actually Mrs. Schoen who did that.
sorry.
I think I answered a question during it, but
Maybe
that was
that's
her
my
presentation.
apologies. I would just like to add to that issue, if you can take this as being valid, if everybody's familiar with the news program 60 Minutes,
Mm-hmm.
they had a presentation recently on dyslexic issues and everything in the community. they made a statement that 50% plus of those people incarcerated or in prison are dyslexic. I found that very interesting.
That is interesting. That's not a statistic I was aware of.
Okay, if it's valid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Anybody else? Any other comments, questions?
No, but I think you did get an article in the paper that was very well written about ESL.
There was, yes, about our ELL program.
So that was good. That was good coverage there.
Well, thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
You were on it, Becky.
All right, we will be moving on now. No Mr. Ledger, Mr. Moreno. Now we move on to Mr. Rob James. Can you feel the anticipation in the room?
Well, good evening. It is time for the annual budget presentation. And as you recall, this is a calendar year budget. So we're going to be talking about calendar year 2020. So first we're going to talk about the calendar, some things that were different this year for the budget prep. We need to go over the capital projects plan, bus replacement plan, the budget funds themselves. We're going to compare those historically and then further to the recommendation. So here we are, September 3rd, given the presentation. With your blessing at the end, I will publish our notice of the public hearing that we need to do. That will be in the paper on Thursday. At our next regularly scheduled school board meeting on the 16th, we will have the public hearing where anyone from the public can make a comment, and then we will formally adopt the budget at our first meeting in October. Some items for this year's preparation. We received our 2019 budget on December 11th, and the DLGF has now really made a push that they are going to have all budget orders issued by December 31st, where sometimes in the past we'd get the budget in February or March. They think this is good. I'd rather them have some actual figures and wait, but governmental units having their budget before the start of the year is a good thing. Overall, our assessed valuation for our funds is just under or just over $4.25 billion for all the properties in our school district. For our referendum funds, which includes the TIF districts, we are just under $4.8 billion. From 2018 to 2019, our net AV increased by about 4.5%. By $186 million, over $200 million for all the properties when we include the TIFs. And the preliminary numbers for next year, for 19 going to 20, is that the net AVs are going up another 4.5%. So what that means in the nutshell is if our needs are the same, then the tax rates go lower because it's a higher AV going into. 2019 is the first year of the changes from the House Enrolled Act 1009 in 2017 and then the Cleanup Act after that. That is where we got rid of the general fund, the bus fund, the transportation fund, and CPF, and rolled those into our new education fund and our combined operations fund. So last year at this point, we were trying to figure out how that was going to work, and we're still only 8 months into it. So we're still learning. We're always trying to push more dollars into the education fund as we can. Another thing that's changing is, as you know, starting here in September, we are no longer paying for our special education expenditures through the Westlake Joint Services Fund. Those expenditures are now coming directly out of our education fund. Most of that money is salaries and benefits, and the payroll this week will be our first pay under that the new scenario. Through the budget session, we've gone back to a 2-count ADM day to determine the funding. So our September ADM count here in the middle of September will determine what our revenue is for this 6-month period of July through December. There'll be another count in February, and that will be determining our funding for January through June. So when we're talking about how much money we're going to get in revenue in 20, it's really going to be based on the February count plus next year's fall ADM. So we're always using projections and our best guesstimates at that time to see where our flows are.
So
And-
Rob, can
yep.
I interrupt? Do you know why we went back to the 2-count day?
We've always done a second count here for the last few years, except it's only just been the last 2 or 3 years where that was just for data purposes and not tied to the funding. I'm not in this General Assembly, but what I have heard is that, you know, you're generally going to have less students in February than you are in September, mainly because of December graduates. And you'll have expulsions, and that's not just here, that is across the district. So unless you're a really growing school district, more often than not, your count is less. So if your student count is less, that's less money that has to be dished out at the state level. So one theory was that they can save some dollars by taking that money well, and I'm going to get into a slide here. So in order to come up with more money for K-12, sometimes you have to take money from one side to put it to another place else, and they felt that they can save some money on the ADM that can free up money that they can put in some other areas. So it's going from one hand to the other, but I think that's the theory. But
Just curious.
sure. And then also, June of 2019 was the first year that we received our first draw on our operating referendum money as part of the tax bills. We got our first settlement in June, next settlement in December. We talked about this at the last school board meeting, that going into 2020, that governmental units in Lake and St. Joe County who had debt on their books from prior to 2009 will now have that debt factored into their property tax caps, so they'll no longer be considered exempt, as we say. And so we used to have, and we still do through this year, have an exempt debt fund, and we have an exempt pension fund. So the debt that was in the exempt debt fund is now going to roll into our regular debt service fund. And then really for the pension debt, we're just changing the name of the fund and dropping the name exempt, and it's going to be the traditional pension fund. So that's not really changing. I just want to take a brief moment and talk a little bit about our funding, which, as you know, comes from the state for our tuition support. Some of the main points of the biannual budget from this past spring is the General Assembly allocated $539 million more into the tuition support over the 2 years. The foundation amount for tuition support is increasing by $175 approximately, $150 per year for the next 2 years. They've also increased funding for the complexity grant, ELL, teacher appreciation grant, NESP, secured school safety, and pre-K special ed grants all got more funding this year than they had in the previous biennium. And that is where they kind of save some money on the tuition side, and they use that to allocate more dollars into these other grants. One of the things that we're actually going to talk about later on my next agenda item is that they also lowered the employer portion of our turf payment for employees, teachers who were hired after 1996. And so we currently, up until this point, we're paying 7.5%, and that is dropping to 5.5%. So that will generate additional dollars for us, in essence, cost avoidance. And we have a resolution that we will get to later that explains that even further. And then one of the other things we've talked about is this 15%, where they are discouraging schools from transferring more than 15% of their education fund revenue to the operations fund. As you know, if you recall, last year at this time, there were a lot of expenditures that used to be paid out of the general fund that were moving to this new operations fund, but all the revenue was still going into the general/education fund. So you have to move some of the corresponding expenditures with you. Estimates, I think I've shared with the board before, is that currently there's, I think 40% of the school districts in the state are under 15%, 40 are 15 to 20, and about 20% are over 20% that they are monies to transfer over. And they have a variety of reasons. They can be getting killed with tax caps that they're not getting the revenue in those other funds, and they have to use education fund money in order to support the transportation and their building maintenance. It's different for lots of people. I will tell you that right now, again, we don't know exactly what the funding is going to be for next year, but we're looking around 12.5%. We're not even close to the 15. So you'll see later that we're keeping more dollars in our education fund than moving over to operations. So it's not an issue for us, and we want to keep that money in the classroom. So in total, when you add all that stuff together, the General Assembly is allocating an additional $763 million into K-12 over the next biennium, which is a 4% increase, which is the highest I've ever seen in my time doing this for 12 years. So we are very appreciative of the efforts. I think all the rallies and the talk from that people are doing is finally getting to them. And I'm just happy of it now, because who knows what's going to be in 2 years from now.
True. Very true.
And then this is just a little summary of the state's general fund and how much they've had the appropriation for tuition support over the last 6 years. And you can see 6 years ago it was about 6.8 billion, and now we're up to 7.5. On the right, I kind of show what is our funding per student, how that has increased, and what those projections are to be for the next 2 years. Next, I want to talk about the capital projects plan. And we are required to do a three-year plan for items that are projects that we intend to do district-wide or at specific buildings. This is a very fluid document. It's just a plan. Plans change. But it takes planning, and you have to know, what you have coming down the road, what are some areas that we've had issues with, what are some housekeeping items that we want to continue with to make our schools a welcoming place. So each year we allocate money in our operations fund for asphalt and roof repairs. This is not a new roof. This is, hey, we had a leak and we need to do some patchwork. Asphalt is patchwork. We always have an allocation to replace desks and chairs in our buildings. Our principals are aware of that. We don't allocate that out to each specific building. It is, we have an amount here so that when a principal talks to us and says, hey, we need new fourth grade desks, or in this classroom, we have allocations for that. And just to kind of quickly, I'm not going to go through everything here, but at the high school, we're looking at doing some work on the tennis courts and the tech room, where the servers are. We need to do some work with the AC units, because it gets kind of warm in there and you got to keep that room cold. We need to change the program cards on the rooftop units for the HVAC here on the freshman center side to make those systems work properly. Grimmer, we did a partial roof replacement this year through the GO bond, and there's still a little bit more roof there that needs to be done, so we're hoping to finish that off next year, along with some lighting replacement and painting and patching the soffits. Across the district, for many years we've been in the process of removing carpets, so we need to do a little bit more work at Kaler and at Bibbich. Bibbich also needs some work on their fire alarm. We hope to paint the gyms at Bibbich and Holman. Also at Holman, we want to expand the parking lot. There's the area to the north that the school district has owned for many years, and we now, with the passing of the family that was at that house, the house has been torn down, and so we are going to move forward in paving that and to open up a lot more parking spaces for Holman, which is much needed. Some roof work at Watson, and also some soffit work. Continuing on the next page, moving into 2021 and 2022, some of the similar items that we see for the district-wide. We're looking at Kaler to replace the gym floor and bleachers. We keep getting some extra, we put that on the list each year, and they're doing a really good job of keeping that up, and we've been able to push that down the road further and further, but we want to keep it. Here is a reminder that is still something that we definitely need to look at. And you'll see some more carpet replacement at various schools. We're getting really close toward having our schools fully replaced on that side. Paving the parking lot at Coling, some more paintings of the gyms and roofs, and then as we get further into 2022, just some possibilities of taking that old former special ed offices in Holman, where Becky and her staff used to be before moving here. Right now, it's just used in storage, but maybe that can be turned into something else. Entry doors at Coling, possibly, and then maybe looking at the playground at Clark and turning that into parking space if there is a need there. So things that we have as ideas to come out of our operations fund. In addition, we have to do a list of assets or equipment that we would intend to purchase over the next few years. There's a $10,000 minimum threshold to be on this list, so that's why everything we buy isn't here. But our maintenance staff, again, this is just our operations fund, so it's mainly our custodial, our maintenance guys. A new trailer for the lawn equipment, snow removal brushes. We have those at each of our schools, but some of them are not in the best shape, and we know how important it is to have our sidewalk cleared for our students and people entering the buildings. We always can use some more scrubbing machines. We call those the little Zambonis that you see around the high school and around. We want to purchase a box truck, and a box truck would be used for multiple reasons. One, it could help with the uni project, and then maybe for the marching band, so maybe they wouldn't have to rent a U-Haul all the time, and then just for general maintenance use, throughout for our guys, in essence, throughout the rest of the week when it's not being used in the summer or on the weekend. So we're looking into that. It'll have to have a lift, but it doesn't need to be refrigerated. So we're going to work on that in the fall here to see if we can get that ordered soon. In addition to the tractors, Bill has mentioned that each school can use some stripping machines to help better with the waxing. Again, with our time constraints and everything we do in the summer, that would really help in getting our speeding up the custodial cleaning in the summertime when they do all that waxing. Some more scrubbing machines, just maybe if we can do one a year and plan it over the time period. Next, we want to move on to the bus replacement plan. This used to be a 12-year plan, but it has now been condensed to a 5-year plan. So even though it's a 5-year plan, all of our buses are listed here. So it's listed generally in the age of the bus. We try to replace 8 to 10 buses a year, but that is just based on need. If our buses are running well, our mechanics are doing a good job with them, and they're safe for our students, we keep them going. We don't do it just because we can. We can always use those dollars for some other purpose. We also just don't trade in the oldest bus. It's the ones that are in the worst condition or have the highest mileage on them. So we budget, again, 8 to 10 buses a year, depending on how many special needs buses we're going to need, because those are more expensive than a traditional bus, even though they're smaller. So here on those next subsequent pages, you will see our buses listed and approximately, the cost for each. So the ones that are hovering around the 110, 11, 112,000, those are a traditional bus. The ones that are in the low 120s are the special needs buses. The ones that are in the $60,000 range are your smaller white buses that might be used for field trips or small athletic teams.
Rob, quick
Yes.
question.
Yep.
The new buses that are being purchased, are they exclusively propane now?
This year we are, yes, the ones, if we go to the last page here, these 10 buses are arriving in November, and those we haven't gotten them yet, so we don't have the corporation ID number on them, but this will be the second year of propane buses. So the prior 10 here were propane. These next 10 that we're getting this year are propane. We've been fortunate enough that we were able to receive a grant through the state that is paying for the difference in the cost between a traditional gas/diesel or diesel bus and the propane. So it's not costing us any additional dollars now while we're getting getting that grant. Who knows how long that grant will last? It's an annual thing that we need to apply for. If we do not get that or they don't offer that, then we would have to have a discussion and say, okay, do we want to continue to purchase the propane buses, which would cost us, more money each year. So,
Okay.
Oh,
Go ahead, Dr. Mount.
no, I was just wondering, do they have the stop arm camera on them? Are they built in, or?
they are not built in.
No, they have to put
But
those on
we
after
have
the fact.
all of with the GeoBond money, we have ordered all those stop arm cameras. They have arrived, and they are,
So we're installing them, our mechanics?
our mechanics are installing them. So it was obviously a lot cheaper, but it's going to take a little time to do that because they are full-time mechanics in the first place. But they're getting on them, and they didn't arrive until, I think, the beginning of August, because we had to wait until we sold the Geo bonds, and then you had to order them. So they're in the process of doing them, but we have them. They all have arrived. I can tell you that.
So my question would be, have we thought about hiring additional mechanics to get those cameras on?
That has not been a part of
Just-
that hasn't been discussion, and I don't know. I have not inquired to see the pace of how many they're able to do.
The 9 buses that have the most violations have been installed. And so we have approximately 85 buses. And so they're doing a couple a week. But the only reason they're not getting more done right now is because we have a handful of buses that are mechanically failing us. So they're getting those ready first. And then they'll get back on the camera installation. They can do a bus, 2 inch bus in about 3 hours.
What are the $150,000 buses?
Those are the 4 coach buses.
Wide ones, yeah.
Yep.
Do you know that if they took care of the emblems on the side of those, what's that called, the sticky stuff, the LC emblem that was peeling off, I noticed at one of the track meets. Do you know if there's been any repair done?
I was not aware of any of that.
Okay,
So-
well, if you could pass that message along, that it would be nice to have that
Yep.
repaired. The vinyl adhesive or whatever
Sure.
it's called, okay.
Okay. So just an estimated cost for buses in 2020, if we end up buying 10, and if the prices were consistent with this year, it'd be a little over $1 million, because it's, again, about $110,000 a bus. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to buy 10, we evaluate it each year. So now we're going to talk about the specific dollars for each of the respective funds. And you'll see on the next 2 slides, we used to have 6 or 7 or 8 funds, and we're down to 6 now because of the elimination of the exempt funds and merging of things. So as I say each year, this is what's called the 16-line statement because there are 16 lines. That's why they call it that. So the first line is the computation of not only just the budget, but what is going to be raised and the approximate tax rate to our taxpayers. So the first line represents what the budget would be for the ensuing year of 2020. So in education fund, we're looking at a budget of $56.5 million, for operations, $21.8 million, and for our referendum fund, about $9 million. What this does, it computes of how much money we're going to need from this past June through December of next year. It's really a 18-month snapshot. So you look, the top part is how much do you need. Then you consider what cash you have on hand, other miscellaneous revenue, and then how much money needs to be raised by the taxpayer at the bottom with an estimated levy. You'll see here for the education fund, there is no levy because that is the money we get entirely from the state. It is not for the taxpayers. And for our referendum operating fund, at the very bottom, you'll see that's the 17 cents that our taxpayers approved. That amount is set. That one doesn't change. Going to the next page is where we have our 3 debt funds. We have the traditional debt service fund, our pension debt service fund, and then our referendum debt service fund. And you can see those dollar amounts to be raised here. For the debt service fund, we're looking at a budget of $7.926 million. For the pension bond, $1,331,585, and for the referendum debt service fund, $13,672,500. As a comparison, here the first column in 2019 is the amount that our approved budgets were for those respective funds, and then 2020 is what we are going to hopefully advertise for this year. You will see that we are budgeting more dollars into the education fund to keep money here, slightly less in operations, and the referendum operating fund. Now that we're going to have this 2020 will be the first year of fully using that fund. As I said, we received those first set of referendum dollars in June, but we didn't spend any of that money. Well, actually, we haven't spent any of it yet until 2 days from now, because our first payroll of the new school year is here September 5th. So we're only going to have 3 months worth of expenditures this year, which will play into a resolution that we'll do later to reduce this year's appropriation, because we don't need a full year's worth. Our debt service fund is increasing. That is mainly due because of the GO bond that we passed earlier this year. And then the pension fund is rather consistent, as is the referendum debt service fund, rather consistent. Our advertised rate last year was $1.12 and 0.51, and we're looking to advertise 2 cents lower this year. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details here on this slide, but this is a historical comparison of what we've advertised since 2013 all the way here through 2020. And you can see we've been consistent, traditionally going down in our advertised rate. Here in 19 was the first year we advertised higher because we had the additional referendum fund. But again, we're going down and advertising a lower rate each year. And then in a colorful bar graph form, you will see that on the bottom we show, well, first I'll say in the red on the top is what our assessed value has been. It's been rather steady, but as you can see here for the last 3 years, it has been going up 4.5%. And that is, that's good for us, because the home values in our community means that we don't get hit with circuit breaker tax impact like many other communities do. And then you can see even with that, here is the tax rate, and we are rather consistent from year to year. The only slight little bump here is because of the new referendum coming on board in 2019. So the recommendation off of the funds page would be our education fund at $56.5 million, operations at 21.8, the operating referendum fund at $9 million, debt service at $7,926,020, the bond, the pension debt service at $1,331,585, and our referendum debt service fund of $13,672,500. With the board's approval, these budget estimates are entered into the state's gateway software, and I've already done that. The notices for the public hearings on the capital projects and bus replacement plan will appear in the paper, like I said, on Thursday. Hold the public hearing in 2 weeks-ish, and then at the first meeting in October, we would do our budget adoption. This is kind of what the public notice looks like in the gateway system for our funds. These budget estimate numbers are exactly what we just talked about, and these maximum amounts to be raised is straight off of those 16-line statement. The form has changed a little bit, where they want you to put in what your current tax levy is and how this advertised amount is changing. This is a little bit weird for this 1 year, because you'll see with our exempt funds, we still have to show this current year, but it's going down 100% because it's not going to be there next year. And the debt service fund really looks like it's really increasing, but it's because these are rolling into that one. So it's not a really fair comparison this year for Lake and St. Joe counties. And then in the physical newspaper, these will be the notices that will appear regarding the bus and capital projects plans that we would have appear in the paper on Thursday. So, with that being said, any questions?
Any questions for Rob?
No.
Good as always, yeah.
Oh, I guess I was working it.
Well,
I think it's a lot to digest right now, Rob, so we're that's why the questions will probably come the next meeting or during the week.
And I just want to make a comment that in a world where everyone seems to be going over budget in every corporation and things like that, we greatly, greatly appreciate you, Rob, that you are keeping us at budget, under budget, and where we need to go. So kudos to you. Thank you very much.
Agreed. Agreed.
but with that said, I will say it is a team effort. It's not just me sitting in my office. We work collaboratively to keep those expenditures in line, working together on staffing and what we can and what we can't do. And, you know, and we're getting into negotiations here, so that works into that. It plays into well. You know, we try to look at classified staff as well, usually in December going into January. So it's a collaborative effort between all of us in order to, you know, do it. I'm just pushing the numbers.
When you can tell that, it shows in the
Yeah.
work.
You,
Definitely.
you do have a great staff that you work with.
All right, well, thank you. So with that being said, I seek your permission to advertise all the aforementioned stuff.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Ms. Lissentine
Second.
and a second from Ms. Suze. Any more comments or questions regarding the budget? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. I hinted in the presentation about how the state reduced the pension amount from 7.5% to 5.5%. That was part of, actually it was part of the budget bill, which a lot of times they just throw miscellaneous things into. Part of the language in there is requiring school districts to, at a public meeting, to formally say what that anticipated savings is going to be dollar-wise, and then how we are going to spend that money that we are saving by contributing less. And so, as you'll see in the resolution I presented in your board packet, by increasing the contribution rate from 7.5% to 5.5%, it computes to a $786,851 less that we as a corporation would contribute to the in-person TRF fund, and that I put in the resolution that those dollars will be used to support the expenditures in the education fund, the referendum operating fund, and the operations fund, and anywhere else where employers, in-person employees are paid out of. So as you can see, that's why we're putting more dollars into that education fund. This is one of the sources of that revenue. Now, I will say that that is just based on if the rate was 5.5 as compared to 7.5 compared to what we had last year. But we are going to have additional staff this year, and we will hopefully through negotiations get pay raises. So by having more staff and more pay, our contribution is still, it's not going to be that full amount. We aren't going to see that full savings.
Okay.
But what that amount will end up netting, we're not sure. But based on the information we have at this time, that's what we're looking at saving. That's how we intend to use those dollars to support the education fund. So I seek the board's approval on the TRF savings resolution that was presented in your board packet.
So moved.
A motion from Dr. Malkow,
Second.
a second from Ms. Lessentine. Any more comments or questions?
I do have a question. So how will the difference be made up?
I was just thinking that too.
That was
I
part
was just
of
thinking
the
that.
state budget where they took $150 million out of state reserves and put it into the pension.
Okay.
So the concern from us in my seat was what happens if
Yeah.
in a year or two years from now in the next budget session, they bump this back up to 7.5, because there could be some school districts that are gonna take this money and hire additional staff or whatnot. Well, then if it goes back up, now how are they gonna cover the cost?
Yeah.
But all indications were from the governor's office at the time is that this is moving forward, and it's no indication that it's only gonna be a 2-year thing. So, I think people in my seat are always optimistically cautious. But that's why we're using that, incorporating it into all of our revenue, and then we use that money going forward.
That's good. That was a good question, because I was just thinking that as well. All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, and my final item is to seek your approval for the donations that were presented in your board packet.
A motion from Mr. Marshall,
Second?
a second from Ms. Suze. Any comments or questions regarding our donations? Nope. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
That's all you, okay.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Mr. James.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comments. I understand we do not have any public comments at this time, so I'll move on to board comments in consideration of future agenda items. Mr. Marshall? Nothing at all. All right, Dr. Malco?
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, for your explanation. Thank you, Mrs. Ahrens, for coming tonight and giving us the update. The partnership between the community libraries and the school corporation libraries, very much appreciated. And thanks, Dr. Bracco and Mr. Marshall and whoever else hung with me when I was trying to explain what I was explaining in the work session. Thank you.
Ms. Lessentine?
I think you've covered all the thank yous
You're
that anyone that I was going to thank. I would like to see some information in the future on our strategic plan with our budget coming, or with our referendum money coming through, things like that. Where are we at with the strategic plan? I'm pretty sure, did I miss AP score in the summer? Did I miss that, or did we not do that yet, AP scores from this year?
I don't think he does that
We
in
haven't seen
September.
it yet? Okay, I couldn't remember the timing, so I just wanted to see that. And I'm just curious, now that we've had our block in place with, I believe, and I could be wrong, with the PTE for, this is our 5th year now, I'd like to see some data on whether or not this is being successful. Is it helping our kids? Is it not helping our kids? Is block good? Is block not good? So I'd like to see a little bit of data on our kids with where are we at. I know that it's not, the 16,000 wasn't all our kids that were failing I-STEP, but I'm just wondering, I'd like to look a little bit more into our curriculum and our schedule and see how we're doing there. So if I could get some more information on that sometime.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ms. Suze?
Dollars for Scholars is hosting a Parent 101 this Thursday, the 5th, at 7 p.m. in the LGI. And I saw on social media a bunch of our teachers from Lake Central were in the Lowell Parade for the Red Fred. It was nice to see.
Oh, the parade coming up September 7th also, if anyone's
Isn't
interested.
that the popcorn
is
one
the
at the
Popcorn
Valpo?
Fest, yes,
Popcorn
please,
Fest,
if
mhm.
anyone's interested in supporting our
It's
teachers.
nice to see all those faces.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. I think everybody's covered the thank yous and everything, so I'm going to leave it at that. And moving on to board calendar future activities, Dr. Vracco.
Sure, I won't belabor the point. We're back here 2 weeks from yesterday for our next board meeting. Check your calendars online for all sorts of fun school activities to attend. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Vracco. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Dr. Malco.
Howard.
All right. And Howard, are you seconding that motion? All right, second that motion. All right, all those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.